Welcome to MathLink Academy, where we connect the dots. I am Mr. C, and I will be covering in this particular unit. We're going to talk about sine numbers, numbers with signs, and we're going to talk about absolute values and also adding and subtracting those signs. So let's get started. So the number line, we're going to start with the number line. The number line shows the relationship between positive and negative numbers. The scale shows both the distance and the direction with 0 as the reference point. So a number to the right of 0 represents a positive number, and the number to the left of 0 represents a negative number. So it represents the negativity. So let's look at an example of what we're saying about this particular scale. And normally I like to draw a number line. So let's look at a number line that we can draw. And notice I put the arrows to show that the number line continues forever and ever in both directions, continually. I like to have a 0 to show where 0 is located. And then from 0 on the right side, we're going to add the positive 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it keeps going on and on and on. Try to evenly space your numbers just like I did, so we can have a consistent spacing. -1 will be on the left side, -2, -3, -4, and -5. So again, if we want to say we're going in the positive direction, we're going positively, it's going to go to the right, positive in the right, and negative is going to be to the left. What I normally like to do is start at 0 and then go whatever direction. If we start with the negative number, then we go in the green way or in that left direction. And if we have a positive number, we go red. Let's continue with this. The next thing I want to talk about is absolute values. The absolute value of a number is the distance from 0 to that number. The symbol for absolute value is the two parallel, or I could say two vertical lines, and they do look parallel. And what we do, we say the number is placed between those bars. We call them those bars. And the absolute value is, and for example, let's use what we have on here. The absolute value of -8 is 8. That means from 0 to -8, the distance is going to be 8. Which is the same thing from 0 to +8, which is 8. And so if you look, the absolute value of 8 is the same thing as the absolute value of -8, which is +8. So my answer would be +8. Now let's go back to our number line. And let's say this. I want to find the absolute value, and let's use a value that we can use. That's on our number line. Let's say I want to find the absolute value of -3. How do I write that? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you something here of how to look at it with the absolute value. So what you say is the absolute value of -3. So in this case, you start from 0 to 3 and just count the distance. What is the distance from 0 to -3, excuse me? In that case, it's just equal to 3. Now, if I say, what's the absolute value, let's do it again, of +3. It just means from 0 to wherever that number is. That's what we put in the bar. In this case, it would be from 0 to 3. And all we're doing is looking at the distance. And so what will be the answer from the absolute value of +3 will also be 3. So that's basically what absolute value means, both in the positive and also the negative number. It's always going to be a positive number there. Now let's look at addition of sine numbers. The procedure for adding two or more numbers with the same signs. And the key is with the same signs. So let's look at that. I'm going to give you an example. And I guess we're trying to get you an example real quick, but let me first go over this for a second. With the same signs, and that's the key. With the same signs. And excuse the PowerPoint is doing its own thinking right here. And so with the same signs, we want to look at that. So the first thing we want to do, we want to add the absolute value of the numbers. If all the numbers are positive, just add them together. If all the numbers are negative, add them together and then just put that negative sign in front of it. So think about it. If all your numbers are positive, if you think about money, the more money you get or the more money you receive, the bigger the pot would be. And so all you do is just adding those numbers over and over again. If they're all the same sign as positive. If every number is negative, if you're adding, all you're going to do, since all the numbers are negative, you're just going to, and in this case, you're going to add all those numbers and then just put the negative sign. Now we'll talk about if there's a mixture between positive and negative, but right now we're talking about all the numbers having the same sign when we add. So let's look at an example of how that looks. And here's our example that we're trying to get to earlier. We want to add 9 plus 5.6 plus 2.1. And adding those numbers, since they all have the same sign, and that's all you want to look at it. You want to look at the sign. Now we know we're just going to add by lining up the decimal. In this case, we're going to say 9, let me show you this here, guys. And so it gave us our answer. We're going to add the 9 plus 5.6 plus 2.1, line up the decimals. We end up with 16.7 or 16.7. We're not going to say the plus, we'll just say 16.7 as our answer. That will be our answer for this particular problem. You just add all the numbers, make sure you line up the decimals, and we have that as an answer. Now let's look at this here. Now we want to add a negative number, another negative number, a negative number, and another negative. Since all the signs are the same, we're going to add them. We're not going to subtract. We're going to add them and then put the negative sign in front. So what does that mean? That means we're going to do this. All the signs are negative. We're just going to add each of those 4 numbers, and we're going to end up with 21.897. But don't forget, you got to put the negative sign in front. So we must have that negative sign in front. So you know it's a negative number and not a positive number. That's because each of those numbers are all negative. So make a note of that. If the signs are all the same with the numbers, just add and then put the sign if it's a plus or minus. With the plus, we drop it off and just leave it as the number to know that it's positive. Okay? Now, adding of sign numbers and the procedure for adding a positive and a negative number. And there's a lot of different ways you can think of it. But let me show you this here, and we'll look at what it's saying here. I'm going to read this, but then we'll show you some maybe another way to think about it. Procedures for adding a positive and negative number, we must look at this. Subtract the smaller absolute value of the larger absolute value. And then the answer has the sign of the number having the larger absolute value. So listen to this, subtract the smaller absolute value from the larger absolute value. Okay, so in addition, I'm saying addition, we kind of do using subtracting when we have numbers with different signs. So for example, let's look at this. We want to add 10 and negative 4. Now we know the absolute value of each of those numbers of 10 is 10. The absolute value of negative 4 is 4. So what the particular procedure was telling us is that what we're going to do, we're going to look at the 10 and the 4. We're going to write them as, and what we're going to do is we're going to subtract that smaller value And then this will give us, in our case, a 6. Now, what we need to know, is it a positive 6 or is it a negative 6? Since, look up here, since our bigger number is positive, this answer would be a positive 6. It's almost like having $10 and you lost $4, which gives you $6. You still have money, but it's less than what you had before. Let's do another example. Now, it looks like it's the same one, but it's a little different. This one say add a negative 10 and a positive 4. And so in our example here, guys, we take the absolute value of 10, or negative 10, which is 10, and the absolute value of 4, which is 4. What our procedure said was subtract the smaller. So it'll be 10 minus 4, those from the absolute values. I know we got rid of the sign for the 10, but we're still going to do it anyway. We have the bigger number minus the smaller number, just like we did with the previous one. You just take the biggest number minus the smallest number in its absolute value state. That would give us a 6 again. Now, in this case, we go back because we're not done. We got to look and see which number had the biggest sign. It was the negative 10. And so my final answer here would be a negative 6. And in this case, my answer would be negative 6. Now, I'm going to rewrite this up here so it'll be properly written. And so your answer would be a negative 6 because it has the bigger number, negative 10, is dominating the smaller number, positive 4. Again, there's other ways to look at it, but looking at the procedure that was given to us, that's how we can add different signs that we have here, okay? Now let's look at some more additions problem that has mixture of sign numbers. And so this one has 5 different numbers, and 2 of them are negative and 3 are positive. So before we just had 2, which was a little more simpler to look at. But in this case, we're going to make it look like 2 to bring it down to a simpler way of looking how to do this. Now, when you have a mixture of positive and negative numbers, we want to combine all the negatives together and then all the positives together and do our rule or procedure that we did before. So let's look up here. So in this case, and I know it's showing us on our PowerPoint, but I want to show you here. I want to add the negative 12 and the negative 5 together. Those are the same signs, so we just add that. That will give us a negative 17. Then I'm going to add the 7, the 3, and the 20. They all had the same sign. And in that case, I believe that gives us 30. So basically what we're going to do, we're just going to say 30 minus 17. The absolute value of 30 is 30. The absolute value of negative 17 is 17. Again, the smaller we subtract from the larger there. And so it'll be 30 minus 17, which we have here, is our 13. Now our 13, will it be a positive 13 or will it be a negative? What do you think? Since I'm going back to this line, since 30 is the bigger, it's positive, it's bigger than 17 overall, our final answer would be positive 13. Now, let's look at some subtraction of signs now. And sometimes the wording gets a little confusing, but let me see if I can help you out with this and connect the dot. It says subtract 8 from 5. Subtract 8 from 5. So now we're not adding, we're subtracting. And we got to watch out how we set it up. So we're going to subtract 8 from 5. Subtract 8 from 5. So what we're going to do, we're going to have 5 first, subtract 8 from 5. From 5 means, I believe we're saying 5 minus 8. Now, there's a lot of ways to look at this particular problem, guys. One way you can say is this is equal to 5 plus, and if you don't like doing subtraction, you can always convert that subtraction or that minus sign. Actually, that's a minus sign. Plus, it's really saying 5 plus a negative 8. We haven't lost. So this is a minus sign, and this is our negative sign. Notice the difference there. Minus and negative. So that's one way to look at it. If we do that, again, you can always change all subtraction problems to addition problems if you like this particular way of doing it. Now, if you look at this, this is basically saying, we're saying 8 minus 5, and then we take the greatest. The absolute value of 5 is 5. Absolute value of a negative 8 is 8. So we take 8 minus 5. We want to do it that particular way. Over here, I'm going to write in a different color so you can see what I'm talking about. If we go from this direction, we're just really saying 8 minus 5, and then that will give us a 3. But looking at the sign that 8 is greater, then this will give us a negative 3. That's going back to our procedure, the way we were taught using addition. If we can see it directly, if you want to look at it another way, you can look at it directly. And if we want to rewrite this as 5 plus, again, a negative 8, another way of saying that, because you can convert that to an addition problem and just make sure you keep your sign, becomes a minus, keep this sign there. Then this is saying that you have 5 plus a lot more, which is a negative 8. And in case, this will also be a negative 3. So both answers are both ways to give us negative 3, depending upon what procedure you like to do it. The green shows us the way we did it earlier, where we take the absolute value of each of those numbers, and when do we take the biggest one minus the smallest, write that down, and then take the sign of the biggest number and put it in front of our answer. Let's look at some other problems that we may have that's on our lesson today. Let's try to take our time with this one. This is subtraction of sign numbers again. In this case, we subtract negative 10 from 4. So let's make sure we write this correct. We subtract negative 10 from 4. So we got 4 minus, that's a subtraction sign, a negative 10. That's basically what it's saying. And there's a couple ways to do this. As you get closer and better with your signs, and we'll talk about multiplication and division at another unit, another way of looking at this, you may see it, it'd be 4. We got these two negative. We could actually put them together and make it a positive 10. And in this case, we're looking at 14 as an answer if we set it up correctly. Okay. I'm going to show you that one way, okay? That's one way. That's what we have there. And it's probably the best way to look at it once you set it up. You're subtracting, it's almost like 2 negative. And we'd like 2 negatives multiplied with each other as a positive. So that's a way to look at it. So once you set it up this way, you know that those 2 negative will become a positive, and you're actually going to end up with a positive 10. It'd be 4 plus 10. And then you add those together, it gives us 14. Again, you have to set it up correctly to understand how we got that answer. Let's look at a few more problems on our whiteboard. And we're going to just work with subtraction. Usually subtraction is the one that we have to work on a little bit more to understand the concept. I'm going to show you some little things to think about. So let's look at the first problem on the top. 7 minus 3. So we'll just do 7 minus 3. So I'm just giving you the problem right as is. So 7 minus 3. is 4. 7 subtract. Now, 3 minus 7, I'm going to say the same thing. It's the same thing as doing 7 minus 3. It's 4. Write down 4. We have the same two numbers, but then we look at the sign. Since this minus sign, or I say this negative sign or minus sign is with the 7, this answer would be a -4, not a +4. So if you know how to do 7 minus 3, you can do 3 minus 7, but then put the negative sign because more of the weight is with that -7. Now I'm going to erase that and show you something else. That's a little shortcut. So we say another way, and let's actually do this bottom one. It could be 3. If you don't like that, you can say 3 plus a -7. Now going back to our procedure, because pretty much every subtraction problem can be written as an addition problem. And so look at this. The absolute value of 7 is -7 is 7. The absolute value of 3 is 3. You subtract that and you write down again 4 like we did on the top. Then you go back to the original problem to see where the sign is greater, or where's that magnitude? The 7 is greater. So this would be a -4. So a couple ways we could look at that. Let's look at two more. Let's use a -4 minus a -10. Again, there's many different ways to do these problems. I'm just showing you a few ways to look at it. So another way you could write this, I think you'll get this, you could say -4, and look at these two right here. I can say plus 10. And we know we're going to be subtracting a little bit more. So this gives me a +6. It won't be a -6, it'll be a +6 because 10 has more weight than a -4. So a couple ways to look at it. Let's use this last one and see if we could get this. How would you do this? How would you rewrite it? Since we have these two negatives here, again, we'll talk more about that. Two negatives back to back to each other becomes a positive. That becomes a positive, and that'd be a 3. So we're really looking at 3 plus 3, which is 6. And that's our answer there. Now, if you have any more questions or want to review this video again to get a better understanding, that would be great. Also, you may want to use some of the supplementary material we have on our MathLink website to get a better understanding when we're talking about sine numbers. Again, I want to say thank you for watching this MathLink video.